Hi everyone, Lovebug here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Quavo album, Quavo Huncho.
Hey, is that you?
No, it's not me.
That's definitely you.
It's Quavo. It's Quavo.
What's a Quavo?
He's amigo.
Okay, listen here, amigo. That's you. That's definitely you.
This is the newest album from 1/3 of the Hotlanta hip-hop trio Migos. Ever since Migos exploded into the mainstream, fans and critics alike have been going back and forth talking about what is their favorite member of the group and which one might have the most solo viability if they break off from the trio. And we've gotten whiffs of that up until this point, with each respective member doing a variety of features. We have Takeoff's Intruder single, Offset's collaborative record with 21 Savage, Without Warning. Quavo actually had a recent collaborative record drop with Travis Scott as well. But no member of the Migos so far has shown themselves to have the wherewithal to carry an entire project on their own, or had even taken the risk to show if that was possible. Until now. Quavo, typically the member that sticks out in Migos' various recordings because he has the highest vocal register and a somewhat goofy voice. And he's not only decided to drop a solo album, but a 66-minute solo album, which, considering Quavo's lyrics, typically his artistic track record, and Migos' recent output, it's not that exciting of a prospect. I don't really think it's out of line going into this album to assume that Quavo doesn't really have it in him to dominate an entire hour's worth of material and have it be fire from front to back. But surprisingly, Quavo kind of holds his own across the length of this record. It's not nearly as bad as I thought it might be going into it. He doesn't exactly reinvent himself or take any huge risks or anything, but he does show that his dependency on Takeoff and Offset maybe doesn't run that deep, because he seems entirely capable of drumming up the catchy flows and weird animated ad-libs that you typically catch in a Migos song entirely on his own. Not that it was ever rocket science or anything, but I think a lot of music fans and critics assumed that there was some kind of secret sauce or special recipe to what the Migos did that couldn't just be recreated by one man, and it turns out you pretty much can. With the project actually sounding slightly more tolerable than Migos' recent album Culture 2, which by comparison with Quavo Huncho was overloaded with way more tracks, and save for a few catchy tracks that broke out as hit singles, the album mostly felt like the trio just resting on their laurels, going through a wash, rinse, repeat cycle until they hit almost 2 hours of material. On Quavo Huncho, though, it seems like there's maybe more of a focus to keep the record at a reasonable length. He can't just rely on the other two Migos to just pad these songs out and kill time and create filler. As a result of that, it seems like he works a bit harder to pick a greater variety of beats and a lot of features to kind of break up the monotony of this project too. It feels a bit less like he's throwing as much shit as he can at the wall just to see what sticks. The best thing Quavo and this album have going for it is that there are a number of tracks that drum up a pretty good vibe, bring some quality production, and some pretty cool features. On his feature, 21 Savage hits one of the most aggressive deliveries and fastest flows that I've ever heard him drop on a track. Also, that Yeezy Slides line was pretty funny. He pretty much makes the whole song, because for the most part, Quavo's lyrical contributions to this track are boring and borderline trash, especially when he just devolves into skirt, 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 skirt. I'm sure there were a few people out there thinking, Quavo, he wouldn't just half-ass his own album, he wouldn't just half-ass his own debut, but you got him. The Drake feature on this thing is pretty cold-blooded. Obviously, Takeoff and Offset, when they appear on this record, it's a pretty natural fit. Cardi B is pretty slick, but really the stunner on the track Champagne ROSÉ is actually Madonna. Yeah, Madonna is literally on this album, singing in this very squeaky, high-pitched, nasally voice that is kind of weird and mystical. It's kind of sweet. She's like a weird, sexy female robot on this track. The groovy, glamorous beat on this song is quite nice too. Quavo also goes toe-to-toe with Travis Scott on a cut on here, with both of them just soaring with reverb and auto-tune on their vocals through a spacey trap beat. And Quavo even goes a little personal, dark, and introspective on the closing cut over here with Kid Cudi. The worst feature easily on this thing is Lil Baby on the song Lose It. Once again, he sounds like a boring, comatose, generic brand Young Thug. Like, imagine Young Thug is Fruity Pebbles and Lil Baby is whatever the store brand is. But even though the feature on this track stinks, it's really the song being one of the weakest on the entire record that makes it unlistenable. The second worst song, though, easily has to be the track Swing, which sees Quavo trying to make some really bad, gentrified, westernized dancehall. Overall, the guests on this album do a lot to make this thing palatable. Many of them outshine Quavo, and they give him the ability to kind of change up the style and the mood of the album without having to carry a lot of that weight on his own, because by himself he's really not that versatile. Because when he's totally on his own with these tracks, he kind of falls into a pattern of just making really boring Migos songs by himself. The song Lamb Talk is a relatively big single going into this album, but with its skeletal trap beat and its triplet flows, it pretty much sounds like your run-of-the-mill Migos track without the other two Migos. It's kind of like a Bad and Bougie Part 2. On the song Workin' Me, Quavo doesn't even sound enthusiastic to be on his own album, even with the titillating topic of the track. And on the song Shine, for some reason, he's desperately ripping off Playboy Carti's whole shtick, his whole style. Then there's the painfully awkward Big Bro, which just sounds like a bad Travis Scott song. And what's even stranger is the concept of the track. Quavo essentially taking this inexperienced kid under his wing because he's an OG now, though I don't know who in their right mind would take life advice from this guy, as the information he passes on is pretty basic. He also kicks the song off with these weird bars that seem very specifically in reference to Lil Peep's death, which a lot of fans took as a diss, but considering the cautionary tone of the song, maybe it's just him trying to impart some, again, advice onto this fictional kid under his wing that he's talking about. The whole structure of the track is a total mess too. There's a point where the kid tells him, "Oh, they got my chain, they got me for my chain," and then he's like, "Okay, all right, I'll help you," but then he doesn't actually help him. He just kind of continues and goes on with the song. So that whole weird storyline just ends up being a diversion and doesn't go anywhere. And that's the thing, there's not really much here in terms of strong topical tracks, and even when Quavo does drop one, it's not really getting to the heart of anything, not really all that focused. Fuck 12, I think, is another example of that, which does have some direct references to police and racism and being black in America, but ultimately the commentary is just so surface level that it doesn't add up to anything. There are a few solo standouts on the album, like the song Biggest Alley-Oop, which I think is mostly great for its haunting la 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 vocal sampled in the beat. On top of it, Quavo does get a little introspective and personal in terms of how he artistically and personally formed into the artist that you see before you making this solo album. There's also the track Huncho Dreams, arguably the most focused concept track on the entire record, which is essentially a lyrical response to Nicki Minaj's Barbie Dreams, where Quavo essentially talks about them having a secret relationship and pulling on her weave and piping it. The song is kind of playful, but it also comes off kind of crass, like if they did in fact have this relationship that he's rapping about, that he's really bitter about the whole thing breaking up. And oddly enough, the song Go All The Way on the album is one that I found to be so bad it was actually kind of good. It's like this really bad club song with these robot manipulations on Quavo's vocals as he's rapping no cap. The call and response vocals on the hook are horrendously amazing. You know, one of Quavo's few advantages is just how weird and expressive and animated his voice is, and it was kind of shocking to hear that he doesn't really use that to the degree that he could have on this new album, which I think resulted in a lot of these songs just feeling really drab and boring. Yeah, you know, the record really isn't all that good, and I think maybe I like it a little bit more than Culture 2, but I think that's only because this record wasn't so long I wanted to die. Because track for track, I think Quavo Huncho has just about as many highlights as that record did. Just less filler and less crap, but only by virtue of just having less songs overall. And I did really like the variety of the production and guests on this thing. You know, most of the stuff that I liked about this record doesn't really have much directly to do with Quavo, which I think really says a lot about the quality of this album. I'm feeling a strong 4 to a light 5 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Quavo Huncho, forever.